Around 1200 BCE, something happened that completely transformed the ancient world. The Bronze Age collapse represents one of the most dramatic examples of how entire civilizations can simply vanish from the historical record overnight. Picture this. The Mediterranean world was home to some of the most advanced societies in human history. The Mycenaean Greeks had built palace complexes that rivaled anything seen before or since. The Hittite Empire controlled vast territories across modern Turkey. Egyptian pharaohs ruled over kingdoms that had endured for thousands of years. Trade networks connected these civilizations in a complex web that stretched from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. Then in the span of just 50 years, it all disappeared, not gradually through decline, but suddenly and catastrophically. Palace centers were abandoned mid-construction. Writing systems that had been used for centuries were completely forgotten. International trade that had operated for millennia ceased entirely. Populations scattered to the winds, leaving behind empty cities and confused descendants who had lost all knowledge of their ancestors' achievements. What makes this collapse particularly suspicious is its scope and timing. This wasn't one civilization falling to internal problems or foreign invasion. This was a coordinated system failure that affected multiple advanced societies simultaneously across thousands of miles. The Hittite capital was burned and abandoned. Mycenaean palaces throughout Greece were destroyed. Cities across the eastern Mediterranean were razed. Even mighty Egypt, which survived the crisis, was severely weakened and never recovered its former glory. The official explanation points to mysterious raiders called the Sea Peoples. But here's where the story starts falling apart. These Sea Peoples appear in historical records primarily as destroyers, with almost no information about where they came from, what their society looked like, or where they went afterward. They're presented as this faceless force that swept across the Mediterranean, destroying everything in their path, then vanished without a trace. Think about how convenient that explanation is. A civilization-ending catastrophe that affected dozens of advanced societies simultaneously, and the cause is attributed to mysterious raiders who left no archaeological evidence, no written records, and no cultural legacy. It's the perfect explanation because it can't be verified or challenged. The Sea Peoples become a historical black hole that absorbs all questions about what really happened during this period. But recent archaeological evidence suggests something far more complex was occurring. Climate data shows significant drought and environmental stress during this period. Archaeological evidence points to internal conflicts and social upheaval within these civilizations before any external invasions occurred. The collapse appears to have been the result of multiple cascading failures that created a perfect storm of civilizational breakdown. What followed the Bronze Age collapse reveals the true extent of the editing. Historians call the next 4 centuries the Greek Dark Ages, during which much of the accumulated knowledge and cultural achievement of the Bronze Age was completely lost. Literacy disappeared almost entirely outside of a few isolated communities. Monumental architecture ceased. Population levels dropped dramatically. International trade networks that had operated for centuries were completely severed. This pattern of advanced civilizations, suddenly losing fundamental capabilities, appears throughout human history with disturbing regularity. The collapse isn't just political or military, it's cognitive and cultural. Entire knowledge systems vanish. Technologies that took generations to develop are forgotten. Social institutions that had provided stability for centuries simply stop functioning. But here's what's truly unsettling about the Bronze Age collapse. When you examine the archaeological record carefully, you find evidence that suggests these civilizations possess knowledge and capabilities that don't fit the timeline we've been taught. Mycenaean engineering shows understanding of advanced mathematics and construction techniques. Hittite metallurgy demonstrates sophisticated knowledge of alloy composition and heat treatment. Egyptian astronomical calculations reveal precision that rivals modern measurements. Where did this knowledge come from? The conventional explanation suggests gradual development over centuries. But the archaeological evidence for such development is remarkably thin. It's as if these civilizations inherited complete knowledge systems from predecessors who left no other trace of their existence. This brings us to our second example of historical editing, one that challenges everything we think we know about the development of human civilization. The mystery of ancient Egypt reveals gaps in the historical record so significant that they suggest entire phases of cultural development have been systematically erased. By 3100 BCE, ancient Egypt had emerged as a fully formed civilization with sophisticated hieroglyphic writing, monumental architecture, and complex religious systems. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built around 2580 BCE, demonstrates mathematical and engineering knowledge that appears to come out of nowhere in the archaeological record. But here's the problem. The technological and organizational capabilities required to build the pyramids don't develop overnight. You don't just decide to move 2 million stone blocks, each weighing several tons, with mathematical precision that modern engineers still struggle to explain. The knowledge systems underlying these achievements should have required centuries of gradual development, experimentation, and refinement. Yet when archaeologists trace Egyptian civilization backward, they find a puzzling discontinuity. The pre-dynastic period shows scattered agricultural settlements and relatively simple material culture. Then almost overnight in archaeological terms, we see the emergence of centralized government, sophisticated writing systems, advanced mathematics, and architectural capabilities that wouldn't be matched again for thousands of years. The gap isn't just technological, it's conceptual. The ancient Egyptians possessed detailed knowledge of anatomy, astronomy, and engineering that suggests long periods of systematic observation and experimentation. Their mathematical understanding included concepts like the golden ratio and precise geometric relationships that appear in pyramid construction. Their astronomical knowledge enabled them to align monuments with stellar observations that required tracking celestial movements across generations. Where did this knowledge come from? The conventional explanation points to gradual development during the pre-dynastic period, but the archaeological evidence for such development is remarkably sparse. It's as if the Egyptians inherited a complete knowledge system from predecessors who left no other trace of their existence. The mystery deepens when we examine the Sphinx. Recent geological analysis suggests that the erosion patterns on the Sphinx are consistent with prolonged exposure to heavy rainfall, not the wind erosion you'd expect in Egypt's current desert climate. The last time the Giza Plateau experienced the kind of rainfall that could produce such erosion patterns was thousands of years before the traditional dating of the Sphinx. This raises disturbing questions about the continuity of Egyptian civilization. Were there earlier phases of cultural development that occurred before the traditional dynastic period? Did the ancient Egyptians inherit monuments and knowledge systems from predecessors whose existence has been erased from the historical record? The answer might lie buried beneath the Sahara Desert, which underwent dramatic climate change during the early period of human development. What is now one of the world's largest deserts was once a green savanna dotted with lakes and rivers. Archaeological evidence suggests that this region supported complex societies before the climate shifted around 5,000 years ago. When the Sahara began drying out, these cultures either migrated to the Nile Valley or vanished entirely. The transformation of the Sahara represents one of the most dramatic environmental changes in recent geological history, and it almost certainly created massive gaps in the archaeological record of North African civilizations. Entire cultures could have risen and fallen in the green Sahara, leaving only scattered traces that are now buried beneath thousands of years of desert sand. This scenario might explain the mysterious appearance of advanced knowledge in early Egyptian civilization. Rather than developing these capabilities independently, the ancient Egyptians might have been inheriting fragmentary knowledge from destroyed predecessors, adapting and rebuilding ancient wisdom that had survived the catastrophic transformation of their environment. Our third example of historical editing takes us to a civilization that achieved remarkable heights before vanishing so completely that even their name for themselves is lost to history. The Olmec civilization of Mesoamerica presents one of the most puzzling cases of advanced knowledge appearing suddenly in the archaeological record without clear predecessors. The Olmec emerged around 1500 BCE with fully developed writing systems, sophisticated calendar calculations, and monumental sculpture that demonstrated advanced artistic and engineering capabilities. Their massive basalt sculptures, weighing up to 50 tons each, required not only the technical ability to carve extremely hard stone, but also the logistical capability to transport these monuments across difficult terrain. The precision of their carvings suggests knowledge of human anatomy and artistic techniques that typically develop through generations of accumulated tradition. Yet the Olmec appear in the archaeological record without clear predecessors. Their writing system, their artistic style, their religious iconography, and their technological capabilities seem to emerge fully formed. When their civilization declined around 400 BCE, much of their knowledge disappeared with them, creating another gap that wouldn't be filled until the rise of later Mesoamerican civilizations. The pattern of advanced knowledge appearing suddenly and then vanishing just as quickly repeats itself across different continents and time periods. What makes these cases particularly suspicious is the systematic nature of the knowledge loss. These weren't gradual declines where some information survived in modified form. These were complete erasures where entire knowledge systems vanished so thoroughly that later civilizations had no understanding of their predecessors' achievements. The evidence suggests that our understanding of human development has been deliberately shaped to obscure the true capabilities of ancient civilizations. Advanced knowledge is explained away as primitive luck. Sophisticated technologies are dismissed as simple accidents. Complex astronomical calculations are attributed to basic observation. But the physical evidence tells a different story. It reveals civilizations that possessed knowledge and capabilities far beyond what the official timeline suggests was possible. And when that evidence becomes too difficult to ignore, it simply disappears from the historical record, creating the gaps and discontinuities that we're exploring today. The fourth moment that reveals systematic editing involves one of the most sophisticated ancient civilizations that mainstream archaeology refuses to properly acknowledge. The Indus Valley Civilization flourished from around 2600 to 1900 BCE across what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, creating some of the world's first planned cities, complete with advanced drainage systems, standardized weights and measures, and evidence of long-distance trade networks. But here's what makes this civilization so problematic for conventional history. The Harappans built cities that were more advanced than anything that would be seen again until Roman times, nearly 2,000 years later. Their urban planning included covered sewers, public baths, and water management systems that demonstrate engineering knowledge that supposedly didn't exist yet. The real issue isn't their technological achievements. It's that we cannot read their writing system despite decades of attempts by linguists and cryptographers. This means we have no access to their literature, their laws, their religious beliefs, or their historical records. We can see the physical remains of their sophisticated civilization, but we cannot hear their voices or understand their thoughts. Think about how convenient this is for maintaining the official narrative. Here's a civilization that clearly possessed advanced knowledge and capabilities, but because we can't read their records, we can't know what they actually achieved. Their silence allows historians to downplay their significance and maintain the fiction that human development followed a neat progression from primitive to advanced. The mystery of Harappan decline adds another layer to the editing. Around 1900 BCE, their cities began showing signs of decay. The careful urban planning deteriorated, drainage systems were poorly maintained, and eventually the cities were abandoned entirely. By 1300 BCE, The Harappan civilization had completely vanished, leaving behind only ruins and an undecipherable script. Without the ability to read their records, we can only speculate about how the Harappans understood and responded to the challenges they faced. This creates the perfect historical black hole where an advanced civilization can be safely ignored because their achievements can't be properly documented or understood. Our fifth example takes us to the Pacific Ocean, where one of the most remarkable achievements in human history has been systematically minimized and explained away. Polynesian navigators accomplished some of the most extraordinary feats of exploration and settlement ever recorded, using sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, ocean currents, and weather patterns to navigate across thousands of miles of open ocean. These navigators settled islands from Easter Island to New Zealand, creating a vast maritime civilization that spanned nearly half the Pacific. They developed wayfinding techniques that enabled them to locate tiny islands in the middle of the world's largest ocean using only observations of stars, waves, and wildlife. But here's what's been edited out of the official story. Much of this navigational knowledge was deliberately suppressed or allowed to disappear by the time European explorers arrived in the Pacific. The sophisticated wayfinding techniques that had enabled Polynesian settlement of remote islands survived only in scattered communities and oral traditions. Entire systems of oceanic navigation that had taken generations to develop were on the verge of disappearing completely. This wasn't natural knowledge loss through gradual cultural change. This was systematic suppression of advanced capabilities that didn't fit European assumptions about primitive island societies. The editing becomes obvious when you examine how Polynesian achievements are presented in mainstream education. Their navigational capabilities are described as primitive intuition rather than sophisticated science. Their astronomical knowledge is dismissed as basic observation rather than complex calculation. Their ability to traverse thousands of miles of open ocean is attributed to luck rather than skill. Yet recent research has revealed that Polynesian navigation systems were far more advanced than anything Europeans possessed at the time of contact. These navigators could determine their position in the middle of the ocean using techniques that rival modern GPS in accuracy. They understood wave patterns, stellar movements, and weather systems with a precision that took European science centuries to achieve. The systematic suppression of Polynesian navigational knowledge represents one of the clearest examples of how advanced ancient capabilities have been edited out of the historical record to maintain narratives about primitive societies gradually developing toward European levels of sophistication. Our sixth moment reveals editing on a scale so massive that it challenges our understanding of human development itself. The Younger Dryas period, between approximately 12,900 and 11,700 years ago, represents a complete breakdown in our understanding of how Earth's climate system operates and how human societies respond to catastrophic change. During this period, Earth's climate underwent a dramatic reversal that plunged much of the northern hemisphere back into near-glacial conditions. Temperatures in Greenland dropped by up to 18 degrees Fahrenheit in just 3 years. Ocean currents that had been stable for millennia suddenly shifted. Ice sheets that had been retreating began advancing again. For human societies living through this period, the Younger Dryas would have been catastrophic. Agricultural communities that had begun developing during the preceding warm period would have faced crop failures, population displacement, and social collapse. Coastal settlements would have been abandoned as sea levels changed. Entire regions that had supported complex societies would have become uninhabitable. But here's what's been systematically edited out of the official narrative. The Younger Dryas coincides with several significant developments in human history that don't fit the conventional timeline. The apparent acceleration of agricultural development in the Middle East occurred during this period. The emergence of megalithic construction in various parts of the world happened around the same time. Some researchers have proposed that the environmental catastrophe of the Younger Dryas may have forced human societies to develop new survival strategies, leading to innovations in food production, social organization, and technology. But the archaeological record from this period is frustratingly sparse, creating a massive gap in our understanding of how human civilization weathered one of the most dramatic climate changes in recent history. The editing becomes obvious when you consider the possibility that advanced societies may have existed before the Younger Dryas and been largely destroyed by the climate catastrophe. If complex civilizations had developed during the warm period that preceded the Younger Dryas, their traces would likely have been obliterated by advancing ice sheets, rising sea levels, and 12 centuries of environmental chaos. This possibility forces us to confront the most uncomfortable gap in human history, the question of whether we're missing entire chapters of human development that occurred before the traditionally accepted timeline of civilization. The archaeological record only preserves a tiny fraction of human activity, and catastrophic events like the Younger Dryas could have erased evidence of societies that achieved levels of complexity we don't expect to see until much later periods. Our seventh example of historical editing involves discoveries that have fundamentally challenged the traditional timeline of human cultural development, yet have been systematically downplayed or ignored by mainstream archaeology. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which dates to around 11,000 years ago, demonstrates that hunter-gatherer societies were capable of organizing massive construction projects requiring sophisticated planning and coordination. The site includes carved stone pillars weighing up to 20 tons arranged in circular patterns that suggest astronomical alignments. What makes Göbekli Tepe particularly problematic for conventional history is that it predates the development of agriculture in the region by several thousand years. The traditional model of human development suggests that monumental architecture requires agricultural surpluses to support specialized craftsmen and complex social hierarchies. Yet Göbekli Tepe was built by societies that were still primarily nomadic hunter-gatherers. The site raises disturbing questions about what other achievements might have been possible during the pre-agricultural period. If nomadic societies could organize construction projects on this scale, what might settled communities have accomplished during favorable climatic periods? How many other sites like Göbekli Tepe remain undiscovered, buried beneath millennia of geological change? The editing becomes apparent in how this discovery has been handled by mainstream archaeology. Rather than fundamentally reconsidering the timeline of human development, the significance of Göbekli Tepe has been minimized. It's presented as an isolated anomaly rather than evidence of widespread advanced capabilities during the pre-agricultural period. The discovery also highlights how much our understanding of human development depends on accidents of archaeological preservation. Göbekli Tepe survived because it was deliberately buried around 8000 BCE, protecting the stone structures from erosion and destruction. Without this deliberate preservation, we would have no evidence that such sophisticated construction was possible so early in human history. This pattern of accidental preservation creating gaps in our knowledge appears throughout the archaeological record. The dry climate of Egypt preserved documents that would have decomposed anywhere else, giving us detailed knowledge of Egyptian civilization while leaving us largely ignorant about contemporary societies in wetter climates. Our eighth moment that reveals systematic editing involves the megalithic builders of Europe, who between 5000 and 500 BCE were constructing massive stone monuments that required sophisticated understanding of astronomy, engineering, and mathematics. These weren't simple piles of rocks, but precisely aligned observatories that tracked celestial cycles across generations. Stonehenge demonstrates knowledge of solar and lunar cycles, eclipse prediction, and geometric relationships that shouldn't have been possible with the tools and social organization we associate with Neolithic communities. The site's construction required moving massive stones across hundreds of miles, lifting them into position with mathematical precision, and aligning them with astronomical phenomena that could only be observed through decades of systematic study. What makes this even more suspicious is that similar megalithic sites appeared simultaneously across Europe from Scotland to Malta, suggesting a shared knowledge system that operated across vast distances. These communities somehow coordinated massive construction projects, shared sophisticated astronomical knowledge, and maintained cultural continuity across generations without any evidence of centralized authority or long-distance communication networks. Then around 1500 BCE, megalithic construction simply stopped. The knowledge systems that had enabled these remarkable achievements vanished so completely that later, European civilizations had no understanding of how the monuments were built or what they represented. The Greeks and Romans viewed these ancient sites as the work of giants or supernatural beings, having completely lost the cultural memory of their human creators. The editing of this achievement becomes obvious when you examine how megalithic construction is presented in mainstream education. These monuments are described as primitive religious sites rather than sophisticated astronomical observatories. Their builders are portrayed as simple farmers rather than knowledgeable astronomers and engineers. Yet the mathematical precision of these sites rivals anything achieved by later civilizations. The astronomical knowledge embedded in their construction demonstrates understanding of celestial mechanics that supposedly wasn't developed until the work of Copernicus, Kepler, and Newton. The systematic suppression of megalithic achievements represents another clear example of how advanced ancient capabilities have been edited out of the historical record to maintain narratives about primitive societies, gradually developing toward modern levels of sophistication. Our ninth example takes us to the Americas, where the Maya civilization reached extraordinary heights of mathematical, astronomical, and architectural achievement during the classical period from 250 to 900 CE. They developed one of the most sophisticated writing systems in the ancient world, created accurate calendars that tracked celestial cycles over thousands of years, and built cities that housed hundreds of thousands of people. Then, around 900 CE, Maya civilization in the southern lowlands simply collapsed. Major cities were abandoned, construction ceased, and populations dispersed. The collapse was so sudden and complete that many Maya cities were swallowed by jungle and remained hidden for over 1,000 years. What makes the Maya collapse particularly suspicious is that it occurred during a period of apparent prosperity and expansion. There's no evidence of foreign invasion, natural disaster, or epidemic disease that would explain such a sudden and complete abandonment of major urban centers. The official explanation points to prolonged drought, but this doesn't explain why the Maya, who had successfully adapted to environmental challenges for centuries, would suddenly lose the ability to maintain their civilization. Recent research suggests that the Maya possessed sophisticated water management systems and agricultural techniques that should have enabled them to survive drought conditions. The editing becomes apparent when you examine how Maya achievements are presented in popular education. Their mathematical and astronomical knowledge is consistently downplayed. Their architectural capabilities are attributed to primitive techniques. Their sophisticated understanding of time and calendrical systems is dismissed as religious superstition. Yet Maya mathematical achievements included the concept of zero, complex astronomical calculations, and geometric relationships that demonstrate understanding rivaling modern capabilities. Their architectural accomplishments required engineering knowledge and organizational skills that mainstream archaeology refuses to properly acknowledge. The systematic minimization of Maya achievements represents yet another example of how advanced ancient capabilities have been edited out of the historical record to maintain comfortable narratives about human development, following a predictable progression from primitive to advanced societies. Our 10th and final moment that reveals systematic editing involves perhaps the most significant gap in human history, one that has been deliberately obscured because it challenges everything we think we know about the development of civilization itself. The global flood traditions preserved by cultures across every inhabited continent represent either the most remarkable coincidence in human history or evidence of shared memories from a catastrophic event that destroyed previous civilizations. These aren't vague references to local disasters. We're talking about specific narratives that describe global catastrophes, the survival of small groups of humans, and the rebuilding of civilization from scattered remnants. The consistency of these flood traditions across isolated cultures, separated by thousands of miles and centuries, suggests either a shared historical experience or a shared source of information about past events. The Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh describes a great flood that destroyed the world. Hindu texts speak of cycles of destruction and renewal through massive floods. Native American traditions across both continents preserve detailed stories of world-destroying waters. Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime stories include flood narratives. African oral traditions describe catastrophic flooding that reset human civilization. If these stories preserve actual memories of catastrophic events, they might represent our only access to knowledge about civilizations that were destroyed so completely that no other evidence survived. But here's where the editing becomes obvious. Mainstream archaeology treats these flood traditions as mythology rather than potential historical records. The implications become deeply unsettling when we consider what modern science has revealed about sea level changes during the post-glacial period. Between 15,000 and 6,000 years ago, melting ice sheets caused global sea levels to rise by more than 400 feet, inundating vast coastal areas that had been inhabited during the Ice Age. These flooded regions represent millions of square miles of lost archaeological evidence. If human societies had developed complex coastal civilizations during periods of lower sea level, their remains would now lie beneath hundreds of feet of ocean water, effectively erased from the accessible archaeological record. Recent underwater discoveries have begun to reveal tantalizing glimpses of what might be hidden beneath the waves. Submerged structures off the coasts of India, Japan, and the Mediterranean show evidence of human construction that predates the flooding of these areas. These discoveries suggest that significant archaeological sites remain buried beneath the world's continental shelves. The Yonaguni Monument off Japan presents one of the most controversial examples. This underwater structure features precisely cut stone blocks, right-angle corners, and geometric patterns that suggest human construction. If artificial, the monument would have been built when the area was above sea level, placing its construction at least 10,000 years ago. Similar underwater anomalies have been identified near India's coast, where side-scan sonar has revealed geometric patterns on the seafloor that appear too regular to be natural formations. These sites remain largely unexplored due to the technical challenges and enormous costs of underwater archaeology. The systematic flooding of coastal areas during the post-glacial period represents perhaps the largest gap in human archaeological evidence. If early human societies followed patterns similar to modern populations, with the majority of people living in coastal areas, then rising sea levels would have destroyed the archaeological record of entire civilizations. This underwater gap becomes particularly significant when we consider that coastal environments would have provided ideal conditions for early human development. Access to marine resources, moderate climates, natural harbours for watercraft, and river mouths that provided routes into continental interiors. If complex societies developed in these environments during periods of lower sea level, their destruction would have created exactly the kind of gaps we see in the archaeological record. The technological implications are staggering. If coastal civilizations had developed sophisticated knowledge systems during the Ice Age, the flooding of their territories would have destroyed not just their physical remains, but their libraries, their schools, their workshops, and their cultural centers. Entire traditions of accumulated knowledge would have been lost overnight, forcing survivors to rebuild human culture from fragmentary memories and scattered artifacts. This scenario might explain the mysterious appearance of advanced knowledge in post-flood civilizations. Rather than developing these capabilities independently, early historical societies might have been inheriting fragmentary knowledge from destroyed coastal predecessors, adapting and rebuilding ancient wisdom that had survived the catastrophic flooding of previous civilizational centers. The survivors of such coastal disasters would have faced challenges similar to those experienced by modern refugees. forced to abandon their homes and rebuild their lives in unfamiliar territories. But unlike modern refugees who can rely on international aid and existing infrastructure, Ice Age survivors would have had to reconstruct not just their personal lives, but their entire civilizational framework. The editing becomes most apparent when you examine how this possibility is treated by mainstream archaeology. The idea that advanced civilizations might have existed before the accepted timeline is dismissed without serious investigation. Underwater archaeology receives minimal funding compared to land-based excavation. Flood traditions are categorized as mythology rather than potential historical sources. This systematic dismissal serves to protect the official narrative about human development, following a neat progression from primitive hunter-gatherers to advanced agricultural societies to complex civilizations. The possibility that this progression might have occurred multiple times, with earlier cycles being destroyed and largely forgotten, threatens the fundamental assumptions underlying conventional archaeology and anthropology. What makes this editing particularly insidious is how it shapes our understanding of human potential and resilience. By erasing evidence of previous civilizational cycles, the official narrative presents our current technological society as the pinnacle of human achievement, rather than the latest iteration in a potentially long series of rises and falls. The pattern we've explored across these 10 moments reveals something far more significant than isolated cases of missing information or archaeological mysteries. We're looking at systematic editing of human history that serves to obscure the true capabilities of our ancestors and maintain comfortable illusions about the linear progression of human development. Each of these moments shows the same pattern. Advanced knowledge appears suddenly in the archaeological record without clear predecessors. Sophisticated technologies emerge fully formed rather than showing gradual development. Complex societies achieve remarkable capabilities before vanishing so completely that later, civilizations have no memory of their achievements. The editing serves multiple purposes. It maintains the narrative that technological advancement is a recent phenomenon. It supports the assumption that ancient peoples were primitive compared to modern societies. It prevents uncomfortable questions about what knowledge might have been lost and what capabilities might have been achieved in previous cycles of human development. But the physical evidence tells a different story. From the precision of ancient megalithic construction to the sophistication of lost navigational systems, from the mathematical knowledge embedded in pyramid architecture to the astronomical capabilities demonstrated at sites like Stonehenge, the proof of advanced ancient achievements is sitting right in front of us. The challenge isn't finding this evidence. The challenge is getting people to look at it without the filters imposed by conventional narratives about human development. Once you start recognizing the signs of historical editing, the pattern becomes unmistakable. Advanced civilizations rise, achieve remarkable technological and cultural heights, then vanish so completely that their successors inherit only fragments and myths. The knowledge systems that took generations to develop are lost in decades. The social institutions that provided stability for centuries simply stop functioning. This cyclical pattern suggests that human civilization might be far more fragile and far more resilient than we want to acknowledge. Fragile because even the most advanced societies can be destroyed by climate change, resource depletion, or social collapse. Resilient because human culture has repeatedly survived these catastrophic events and rebuilt itself from scattered remnants. Understanding this pattern becomes crucial for recognizing both the achievements and the vulnerabilities of our current civilization. The forces that have repeatedly destroyed complex societies throughout history are still operating today. Climate change, resource depletion, social instability, and technological disruption continue to threaten the continuity of human knowledge and culture. But the pattern also reveals the remarkable ability of human societies to preserve essential knowledge through even the most catastrophic periods. The traditions that survived previous dark ages, the wisdom that was passed down through oral culture, and the innovations that were rediscovered and rebuilt provide insights into how human civilization can maintain continuity through dramatic change. The 10 moments we've explored aren't just historical curiosities or archaeological mysteries. They're windows into the true nature of human development and warnings about the fragility of accumulated knowledge. They reveal that our understanding of the past has been deliberately shaped to hide uncomfortable truths about what our ancestors achieved and what we might have lost. The evidence is still here, sitting in plain sight, waiting for anyone willing to look beyond the official narratives and examine what the physical remains actually tell us about human capability and resilience. Once you learn to recognize the signs of historical editing, you'll never look at the past the same way again. The same way again. These 10 moments reveal something far more disturbing than isolated cases of missing information or archaeological puzzles. What we're looking at is systematic editing of human history that serves to maintain comfortable illusions about linear progress while hiding the true scope of what our ancestors accomplished. The pattern is unmistakable once you learn to recognize it. Advanced civilizations appear suddenly with sophisticated knowledge systems. They achieve remarkable technological and cultural heights. Then they vanish so completely that later societies inherit only fragments and myths. The editing isn't accidental. It's deliberate suppression designed to protect narratives that can't survive honest examination of the physical evidence. From the Bronze Age collapse to the flooded cities beneath our oceans, from the undecipherable Harappan script to the astronomical precision of megalithic monuments, the proof is sitting right in front of us. The challenge isn't finding this evidence. The challenge is getting people to look at it without the filters imposed by conventional education. Understanding these patterns becomes crucial for recognizing both the remarkable achievements and the ongoing vulnerabilities of human civilization. The forces that have repeatedly destroyed complex societies throughout history are still operating today. Climate change, resource depletion, social collapse, and knowledge loss continue to threaten the continuity of human culture, just as they did in previous cycles. But perhaps most importantly, these edited moments reveal the extraordinary resilience of human civilization. Our species has survived repeated catastrophic events, preserved essential knowledge through dark ages, and rebuilt sophisticated societies from scattered remnants. The wisdom that survived these collapses offers insights into how we might navigate our own challenges. The evidence is here. The patterns are clear. The only question remaining is whether we'll continue accepting edited versions of our past, or finally acknowledge what the physical proof has been trying to tell us all along. Once you see the signs of historical editing, you can never unsee them. And once you understand the cyclical nature of human achievement, you'll realize that our current civilization might not be as unique or as permanent as we've been led to believe.